Welcome to Stochastic Agency. My name is Brian, and today I've got a question for you. Has your game master ever described a mysterious treasure-laden chest and then just smiled at you? You know the one I'm talking about. No words, just a little cryptic smile. And in that moment, you and the whole party suddenly realize without a doubt that the chest is probably trapped. So how does this happen? That smile and the gut feeling it gives you is a perfect example of a hidden language that I want to talk about today. And it's labeled as metacommunication, which is simply communication about communication. It's all of the extra information that we send that tells people how to actually understand the words we're using. Think about the phrase, "you're late." If I say it with a stern glare, it's a reprimand. But if I say it with a grin, it's friendly teasing. The words are identical, but the tone of voice and facial expressions, the metacommunication, completely change the meaning. At the gaming table, this happens constantly, every minute. According to communication theorist Paul Walzwick, you actually cannot not communicate. Even your silence, your posture, a bored sigh, sends a message to everyone else at the table that they're going to interpret. When a player leans forward with wide eyes and says, "I attack the goblin," they're metacommunicating. Their engagement and their character's emotional state are the potential messages. When a GM rolls dice behind the screen for no apparent reason, they're metacommunicating. It could be to enhance a sense of danger, increase uncertainty, or simply to try and build tension. This unspoken language is the invisible architecture that gives games their weight and meaning. Recognizing that this channel exists is the first step in understanding, practicing, and working towards mastering it. So that's the basic concept. The unspoken cues that everybody talks about that frames every word that we use. But in tabletop games, it's more complex because we're not just one person at the table. How do we manage the language when we're a player, a character, and a person all at once? The four hats you wear at the gaming table. We now have an idea of metacommunication and the secret language that it represents at the table. So let's talk about why it's so uniquely complex in tabletop role-playing games. A scholar, Gary Allen Fine, put it as the player, person, and character share a brain. This means you're constantly juggling between at least four different conversations at once. So let's break these four layers down. The first is the character-to-character layer. This is the most obvious one. It's your dwarf fighter, maybe in a gruff voice, saying, "I'll take the first watch to the elf rogue." This is the dialogue that happens entirely inside the game's fictional secondary world, also known as the diegetic layer. Second, you have the player-to-player layer. This is you, the player, talking to your friends about the game itself. It's where you ask things like, "Hey, should I use my fireball now or save it for a bigger group?" This out-of-character conversation is a meta-communication about tactics and strategy. The third is the player-to-game master layer. This is the channel for interacting with the rules and the world. You use it when you declare, "I want to search the chest for traps," or ask the GM, "What do my senses tell me about this room?" You're meta-communicating with the game referee to declare your intent and understand the world that the character is in. And finally, perhaps the most ubiquitous, is the person-to-person layer. And this underpins everything else. It is the real-world default social dynamic, the friendships, the inside jokes, the personal histories of the actual people sitting at the table. This layer is always active, and it can influence every other level of communication. An average role-playing session involves shifting between these four layers constantly, and hopefully seamlessly. But so far we've mostly talked about the things we say. What about the messages we send without speaking? So next, let's just focus on the unspoken language of the table. The unspoken language of body and tone. So we know we're constantly shifting between these multiple layers of communication at the table. But much of the most powerful information we send happens implicitly without any conscious thought. This is the unspoken language that can create the atmosphere of your game. So let's start with body language, or what researchers call kinesics. This is a huge channel for metacommunication. A player leaning forward with rapt attention signals a deep level of engagement. One slouched back with their arms crossed might be signaling boredom or even disagreement with what's happening. A GM who makes eye contact with a specific player when an NPC mentions a dark secret is sending a powerful targeted message. The many physical signals we use create a constant, unspoken dialogue about how everyone is feeling about the game. And when playing in character as character, They can do the same thing. But next is vocalics, or the way we use our voice. This is not just about speaking in a manufactured voice. This is about all the non-word parts of your speech, your tone, your pitch, your volume, and even size and laughs. A player can communicate their character's fear by speaking in a hushed, rapid tone, or a barbarian's confidence with a booming voice, all without having to say, "My character feels." A GM shift to a low, deliberate pace when using description and foreshadowing can bring or build suspense before a single monster appears. I'm a big proponent of choosing your words consciously. However, the way you say something is often just as important as the words you're actually going to use. So finally, the physical environment is a meta-communication channel. How the players arrange themselves around the table can influence who talks the most. In a virtual game, these signals are dampened when only a small portion of the person is visible, or lost when the game is played faceless. These implicit channels are powerful because they often fly under the radar, shaping our experience subconsciously. But what happens when we need to be direct? Due to overt social changes in role-playing games, several tools have been developed to make this language explicit and clear. So next, we'll talk about some formalized rules for talking about the talk, making the hidden language official. So far, I've covered the language of body and tone, but relying on unspoken cues can lead to misunderstandings. Enter a suite of explicit tools to make meta-communication clear, structured, and hopefully sound. The most common form, of course, is out-of-character talk. Far from being a true distraction, it can be a vital tool for any given function of the game. We use it for tactical planning, for rules clarifications, and for building social camaraderie with jokes and banter. The key is to signal your intent clearly. A simple hand signal saying "quick OCC question" creates a clear boundary between your character's voice and your own voice. But it also increases role distance. Now, beyond simple out-of-character talk, we have so-called safety tools. These tools are, at their core, a highly structured form of meta-communication designed to ensure that everyone at the table feels comfortable and respected. The purpose isn't to limit, but to build the trust necessary to explore deep and engaging themes. Lines and veils is simply a method used typically in session 0. A line is a hard limit, a topic that will not appear in the game at all. A veil is a fade to black mechanic, meaning that it's a topic that can be present, but we're not going to describe it or we're not going to role play it in detail. This is proactive meta-communication that sets a group's boundaries before you even start playing. For in the moment, they have what's called an X card, a simple nonverbal, low-friction channel to say, stop or move away from this subject. Now, using these type of tools is up to individual choice and the group. The goals here are to make the table comfortable playing whatever they want, be able to be more trusting, and ultimately create a creative space. As a subject, they become a battleground for many who turn towards politicization and away from empathy and everyday social courtesies. So now that we understand the basics of what, where, and how metacommunication happens, how can you, as the player, use this knowledge to transform the game that you're playing? A guide to work towards mastery. We've defined metacommunication, broken down the layers of talk, and looked at both the unspoken and formalized channels that are used. Now let's bring it all home with 4 practical methods that you could try to incorporate or become a more effective communicator. First, clarify your intent. Your in-character dialogue can't always capture your character's full internal state. Use the meta channel to share that crucial subtext. For example, you could say, out of character, my character is trying to sound brave right now, but he's actually terrified. This separation of player intent from character performance gives the GM and other players the information that they may find handy, especially if you're not a confident player. Second, use out-of-character talk constructively. It is a tool to use for a purpose, to avoid confusion and maintain the game's flow. This is all about sending clear signals. When discussing tactics, collaboration, don't command. Instead, try offering up suggestions and ask questions. Hey, do you think this is a good place to use haste on my fighter, or are you going to have to concentrate? The third is become an active listener. Metacommunication is a two-way street. It requires paying attention to the body language and tone of your fellow players. If someone becomes quiet in a particular scene, it's a powerful signal that they may be disengaging or potentially uncomfortable. When you're in a group, discussions and all this happens, you should paraphrase and respond. This validates each other's contributions, ensures that people want to resolve things through agreement and not disagreement. Ask what you need is the fourth one. Don't let your fellow players be mind readers. If you're feeling lost and frustrated or unsure how to contribute, use an explicit channel to help get this across. Hey, I'm feeling a bit stuck here. Is there a clue that my character might have missed? Advocating for your own experience helps keeps you engaged and can potentially make the game better as a whole. Now, mastering all this stuff is a process. It's about becoming a better collaborator, a better co-author for your group's experience. So what's the most common unspoken signal that you see coming up far too often at the game table you're playing at? As always, like, subscribe, or dislike at your own discretion.